And I think we're good. All right, so I just wanted to start with a land acknowledgement. We'd like to acknowledge that the land we inhabit today was once known as Tabongar. It was the home of the Gabrielino Tongva people, the original stewards and caretakers of this land before we came to live here. They were first colonized by Spain in the 1700s, and then by Mexico in the 1800s, and then by the United States when we declared war on Mexico in 1846. We'd like to acknowledge that we're all here today as a result of this land being taken from the Tongva people by force. If you'd like to learn more about the native land or to see any other native land designations across the country, you can visit this site. Yep. I think we were just going to get started first by going over the annual report that we sent out. We can go over a couple of the slides, and then if anybody has any questions or wants to focus on anything more specifically, we can address that.
Sorry, Chrissy. I'm just really quick going to go over our community of practice guidelines, which I'll paste here in the chat for you really quick. And we just want to acknowledge that being in community together, that we want to follow these guidelines about how we interact with each other. So we're going to ask that this evening that you speak from your own experience. Hopefully you'll challenge your own comfort zone. Raise up. So raise up on the side of justice and certainly share your opinion and help raise others up as well. We'd love for you to assume good intent and importantly, take care of impact. So that, you know, generally means if a comment or a question is impactful to somebody else that you didn't intend it to be that way, taking care of that impact and respecting it. We'd like for all of us to respond with curiosity, interrupt for justice if you notice something unjust is said. There's going to be a lot of non-closure today as this conversation is continually ongoing for our community. What's learned leaves, specific stay, and ask permissions to share stories if there are any, and make it plain. So, you know, we really want to talk about, especially when we're talking about equity, injustices in a very plain way when possible. So I'm going to kick it over, I think, to Grant next.
Yeah, thanks everybody for being here. Thank you, Christy. Thank you, Lauren. I'm actually going to shoot it over to Rami, and we're going to just sort of kick off with the goals of our organization and sort of how we came to those, and then open it up to you all in case there are questions that you have about the annual report that was put out. And we're not going to go through it slide by slide unless, you know, you request slide by slide. But yeah, we'd love to hear what fascinated you. If you have any lingering questions, but with that, let me share my screen and I will kick it over to Rami.
Awesome. Excuse me. Thanks y'all for showing up. So in 2018, we had a series of specific strategy meetings. We had conversations with folks in the community. And we really built these goals based on those conversations. So specifically, all of this, as I've mentioned in this sort of prelude to the report, all of this is a work in progress, right? And it's all sort of changing, right? And going to continue to change and shift, certainly as a new board steps in. But as of 2018, we've been focused on, one, creating diverse and sustainable playing opportunities for more people in the greater LA community. Two, creating a community that more accurately reflects the city in which we live, which of course here is the greater Los Angeles area. Three, formalizing the LAOUT board structure for long-term leadership and growth. And four, utilize marketing and outreach to increase involvement in LAOUT. You know, admittedly, some of that has been slightly adjusted because of COVID and 2020 and what this year's brought. And, you know, just speaking personally, I'm not entirely certain number 3 won't continue to change fairly dramatically or can't continue to change fairly dramatically. But I think that the other goals on here, specifically creating a more diverse and sustainable community for everyone, I think that that is something that your current board would stand by wholeheartedly, and you know, certainly hope to elect a new board that is predominantly interested in continuing that. So I think I'm going back to Christy, and then we're going to field, I think, questions, and maybe Grant wants to field questions, specifics about the annual report. You can take that picture down. I don't need to be staring at it, all of y'all.
Yeah, I think if anybody has any questions or wants to say anything, if you go into I think you click on the participant button in Zoom, you can see there should be an option over in the side menu that says raise hand, so we can have, we don't have to deal with too many people talking over each other and trying to speak at the same time. I thought Fox was literally raising his hand for a second. Nobody has any specific questions. We can just kind of move on, but.
Yeah, so if you have any questions regarding the annual report, if there's anything you appreciated in the annual report, if there's anything that you'd like to see in the future, those are all great things to sort of kick us off.
You can also put it in the chat too. Cool, everybody loved it.
Christy, do we have the ability to like give thumbs up?
Yes, on the reaction button, there should be a thumbs up and applause at least.
Oh, nice.
Appreciates that it exists and that she got to see it.
So maybe, yeah, maybe we could start with just a thumbs up if you were able to look at the annual report prior to this evening's meeting. Okay.
Everybody did their homework.
Oh.
The next portion will be a quiz, so just kidding.
Okay, that's great. So it looked like, for those folks that are not board members, it looked like maybe a third to a half that gave a thumbs up. The folks that have not, were you aware that it was out, other than knowing that there was a town hall tonight? Give a thumbs up. This is just a test to see if you're like actually on Zoom.
If they're listening.
Fantastic. Okay. Cool.
Drea has her hand up. Go ahead.
Hi, yes. So I reviewed the annual report, and I was wondering if the board has thought through ideas of what to do with increasing field costs and what that kind of looks like in the next couple of years.
Yeah, that's a problem. Yeah, I think on that slide, it's been a little drastic what increases we've seen over the last few years. And we've been trying to be mindful of the community's concerns about raising costs for our leagues. But even with our last winter league in January to March of this year, we ended up losing money on that league because of excessive costs. And we didn't know what the cost would be until after we'd already set the costs for the league. So it's been a little bit hard to predict when things are changing, and who knows if field sites are going to be charging more after COVID, or if they're gonna I mean, I assume there will be a high demand. Everybody will want to be getting back out there, but it's definitely something that we need to look into and figure out the best way to use our funds. I know for Summer League, we had even talked about potentially not doing jerseys and discs so that we can put those costs still towards fields, things like that.
We're also working to find more field space and have it opened up to us. And some of that does involve new insurance and going through all the paperwork and working with brokers to figure out. LAUSD has much higher requirements than the city of LA for their what insurance they need to allow us to play on those fields. And so that's been a thing that we've been looking into and constantly researching and keeping in mind too, in the hopes that paying for the better insurance might then open up more fields, which LAUSD has different pricing and points. And obviously we don't know exactly how things will change, especially because they're concerned about their students and everything first and foremost outside of the community joining after COVID. But there's a lot of different avenues that we're trying to find. And then Kelsey has worked tirelessly with creating new contacts and keeping up with old ones. Sometimes it's a matter of discussing with them. And like this year for St. Pat's Hat, even though it didn't end up happening, there was long conversations being had with them to explain our structure in order to get a nonprofit price point rather than the main price point that they just give to everyone right off the bat kind of thing. So there's no specifics we can give you about how it will be affected, but know that even before all this, the COVID and everything, we were practicing and trying to find lots of different avenues in order to help, because it is I think when we calculated, it was about a 33% increase just from last year to this year for field costs, just even at similar sites, not even like overall if we had an expensive field site or something like that, like Rancho Cienega just put their prices up. And so it'll be a constant thing we have to watch and find new avenues. And we've also I don't know if we partnered, but we helped support the new building of the field in Santa Monica. Like we made sure to have representatives be there and show our support for the building of new field space. Multifaceted in that.
Just to sort of add on to what Christy and Joe have said, sorry, can you all hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay, cool. You know, Frisbee is incredibly, like embarrassingly low on the totem pole of what gets field space in the scheme of things. I mean, flag football, rugby, soccer, right? AYSO obviously has a specific type of soccer. You know, they have, I mean, pretty serious like money and time and energy to throw towards getting in line for permits, which is often a time thing. So we just want to recognize that post-COVID, and Joe mentioned this, I think, or Christy did, like, I gotta tell y'all, like, I don't see Frisbee getting a ton of field space right away. I think it's going to be an uphill battle. I think we're going to have to reestablish some of those relationships that, frankly, we had long time established, you know, something we did not widely publicize. One of the large issues this year with getting field space for Winter League is that our point person passed away at the office in the middle of us renewing those permits. Now, that's not the only reason why Winter League was delayed, but it is one of the reasons, right? And so we sometimes does feel like we're taking a step forward and 2 steps back, or yeah, that we're ending up behind where we want to be. So I think creativity is key, right? This is not a specialty of mine, but I think being willing to possibly play more beach, right? And I know I love beach, so obviously that sounds self-aggrandizing, but I'm serious. Like, if those are the fields we can get, then maybe that's what we do, right? I think there's probably a lot of other answers, but I think we have to be very conscientious about stepping into new spaces, new field sites that we haven't yet used. We have to be really accommodating and mindful of our presence, is what I would ask. It's a great question. Thanks, Drea.
I Eric also put in the chat asking if there were discounts if we reserve longer time periods, or if it's just always on a per hour per night basis. And I think we end up actually getting Rancho for longer than we need because they always book in like a certain block of time, right, Joanna? Does that sound right?
Yeah, so as far as we've functioned in these past 2 years when I've been handling the finances, there hasn't been discounts just by having longer periods of time. It's just you pay, it is by hour, and then they put on staff hours to be there, light, much it costs to run the lights. What Chuck was doing differently before, it's not so much that he was doing something differently, like Kelsey is still doing plenty to cultivate relationships. It's that that contact we had at Rancho Cienega drastically did alter. She gave us huge discounts that we figured out she probably wasn't really authorized to give us. And that's a huge thing that we have really capitalized on, and it really helped, which really added to why there was such a big jump this year of like a 33%, because we weren't paying for staff hours before. We literally only paid for what the lights were rather than a rental of the whole space. And so they got audited. There's a lot more of following things by the book that had to start happening that we then had to pay. And it wasn't like wrong for us to have to pay, but it was frustrating when you're like, we were paying $25 an hour. What happened? And they're like, oh, it's now $100 an hour. So it was just, we had very fortunate contacts that Chuck did work very hard to get and keep. And unfortunately, sometimes red tape changes things.
Cool. I don't know, does anybody have any other questions about the annual report or anything that they want to dig a little deeper into? All right. I think the other question was just if there was anything else that we wanted to see. Oh, Marcus, you have a question. One of the insurance costs that you guys are incurring or were incurring last year. I don't think I saw that in the report.
Those are under the admin, I think. Joanna would know best.
We may have to follow up on that one if we don't have it off the top.
Joanna, you are muted.
Sorry. Yes, they are in the admin. That gets combined with some marketing and then like some equipment purchases or something like that. Insurance is the most costly thing. Let's see. It in the realm of in the 4,000s. It costs, I think, is what we paid for 2019 or for 2020.
It's also worth noting that that is a jump as well, but it's increased coverage. Prior years, we had inaccurate reporting about how many games were being played through our leagues. So we decided it was time to rectify past errors and make sure that we were actually covered for all of the players and games that we were playing.
And I think we, since we have LAOUT tournament now, that was a huge jump with covering those costs, which of course we still make money from the tournament to cover that adjustment, but.
No, I don't. Someone correct me wrong. I think LAOUT has its own event insurance that doesn't get calculated into that. That's just for our leagues and events that we put on outside of LAOUT, the tournament. But it was still like not calculating all the games, and then adding Fall Beach League this year was being official. I mean, I think it was still under LAOUT insurance before, but being like officially counted in our counts for how many games we play in a year, all that added it, and then they calculate the rates for it.
Cool. Yeah, I think just one other question, if anybody has any thoughts on other things they would like to see in the annual report in the future, you could speak up or put them in the chat, just ways that we can provide more information for everybody. What efforts have been taken to make layout look more like the general community? Oh, going back to that goal. Does anybody want to take this one?
Yeah, one of the big decisions that we made, and we've done this now a couple times, is consulting with experts on diversity. And so we've engaged with both and to help us with the election process. We recognize that the board, well, I'm just going to speak first person. I recognize that I'm a white woman. And so, my interest in balancing diversity intentionally with respect, like I sometimes am not sure how to approach that. And so I think that our board organization does feel that if the board can be more diverse and better represent the community we're in, that we will be able to diversify the community as well, the Frisbee playing community as well. Not a great answer. I'm sorry, Skip.
We also, in addition to helping with the election, both and is also helping onboard the new board members and setting up goals for the future. So hopefully we will be able to make more strides because I don't think that we have done enough yet.
Yeah, I would just add that not enough. We haven't really done very much broadly within our community to engage sort of like non-white people of color, people from different socioeconomic backgrounds. As we know, Frisbee very commonly includes people who have gone through college because that's where they learned how to play Frisbee. So including people who haven't gone to college, et cetera. We just haven't done very much about that to date. And Lish's comment is awesome and something that we've talked about around the folks who we see at Rancho, engaging them more with Frisbee. And I know some of that has happened informally, but as far as what LAOUT as an organization has done, that there haven't been massive kind of formal efforts. And it's certainly something we're interested in and want to help promote that into the future, whether that's continued helping volunteering and creating programming and things like that. And I think also, a lot of that is going to come with partnering and working with SkyU and with really engaging the college athletes in LA, because the younger players, I think on the whole are more diverse than some of us older folks who come from similar demographics. So.
Yeah, we had also started trying some baby steps with things that we did know that we could try and implement. So like, unfortunately, we had to cancel our beginner league, but that was our first time introducing a sliding scale cost for it. I know that one of the things I'm glad that I got a chance to work on was working on setting up that whole questionnaire that we had with the membership signups to ask about different socioeconomics, racial, gender identity, questions that we had never asked before, so that we actually had metrics so that we could point to and see where we were succeeding and where we were failing with our efforts. So we only have 1 year of the data, but hopefully it can keep moving forward with that so that we can see year to year if we're doing better, if we're doing worse, if certain efforts are benefiting in the way we would think, or realizing that what we thought was the right way to go might not be actually working as well. So yes, we can do a lot more and we really want to, but we have also trying to start implementing some of the pieces that can maybe help us as we try and do more.
Yeah, I think that actually Joanna was really integral in getting our demographic data collected as a requirement as people sign up for LAOUT, because we've never collected racial, socioeconomic, gender data on our participants before. So if we don't know who's participating, it's really hard to tell where we need to go and who we need to engage in order to diversify our participants. So we just started collecting those data this year as a requirement. I think it's for every, is it just for membership or for every?
It was, I think, just when you sign up to renew membership.
Every time you sign up, yeah. So we started doing that, and we will continue to do that, and we will also continue to improve that process because we got some really good feedback, for example, from some folks on the equity committee around, what questions we're even asking as far as, how we're labeling race and things like that, that we want to be able to both be accurate and sensitive to our community and be able to collect data that will help us and that will accurately reflect who we are now.
We have another question about UPA USAU provided insurance at one point for leagues. Do they still do that, or would it be enough for our needs? I don't know enough about that.
I can take that. They do offer that, but it would require that every participant in that league become a member of some variety. Yeah.
A member of USAU specifically, not a member.
Correct. Correct. And I think Don was making a recommendation. Don, correct me if I'm wrong, about wanting to know like how many new players there are per year, how many people we've lost. Is that correct, Don?
Yeah, I saw that we do kind of have that, but like, as you know, we continue to collect data. We just see from year to year. That would be just something cool to see.
Yes, so I'm glad you brought it up because actually Tyler, who's I think our marketing director, but not currently a voting board member, is actually working on a retention model. So we look forward to having that data available for the community soon. It's not quite finished because it's a lot of like Google spreadsheet manipulation, but I've seen a sort of a beta version of it, and it looks good. It's cool because you can track those things that you're, I think, addressing, Don. And also we collect zip codes. So we can, I think he also has like a heat map or something. So we can see how spread out folks are. So.
All right. I don't know, are there any other questions? Oh, somebody saying something?
Yeah, me. Mentioning the USAU provided insurance, I know that there are some like disc organizations that do that. I know that some are don't. Is there like a cost benefit, I guess, to how different the cost would be if we all just had to be USAU members? I mean, admittedly, like a lot of the members in our community aren't USAU members already, basically everyone that doesn't play club. But wouldn't that help offset the cost of, or increasing cost of insurance? Or not? I mean, I have no idea.
But insurance is a large cost, but fields are the crux of what we're paying per league, field sites, right? And so box to that question, like our community, I believe, would take great issue with being told that they have to pay $55 to join USA Ultimate. Just optically, I think that would be a problem.
They wouldn't have to pay $55, but they would have to pay for the affiliate adult membership, which is $18.
Oh, okay. Well, then that changes things quite a bit. I don't know.
Per year, correct?
Yeah.
Right.
Per league.
Yep. And I just ran the numbers real quick. It's actually cheaper for us to buy our insurance, and it keeps money in our community with signing up for memberships for us to help us do more and do scholarships and things like that. So yes, everyone could pay the $18 or have it with their club membership, but it benefits our community to have the insurance for us, and it actually ends up being cheaper per person.
Okay, I think that's a good point to know. Thank you.
Any other questions for the annual report, or do we want to move on? Cool. I think next thing we had was a little bit of return to play chat. Grant, do you want to take this one?
Sure, yeah. So in our prior town halls, we hadn't really addressed the fact that USA Ultimate, the sports national governing body, put out a return to play guidelines. And when we're thinking about LAOUT's return to play, we figured there might be some questions as to how these policies that USA Ultimate sort of put out, or guidelines rather, might fit in with our state and local guidelines. And just to sort of give a preface, I can share my screen again. Apparently decent at that. Or not. Yeah. So they put out this return to play guidelines, and you can see here the stages. Stage 1 is basically individual skills training, and that would pretty much correlate to state and Los Angeles return to play stage 1 or level 1 or phase 1, whatever you want to call it. Then stage 2 is small group skills training, and they sort of break that into two. One is where 2A is where you don't share any equipment, and 2B is where you can actually start sharing equipment with a small number of people. And then stage 3 would be small group interactive drills and competition. Stage 4, medium group local competition, and stage 5, large group travel competition. I think there's a lot of room to sort of make correlations between these different documents with the state of California and Los Angeles. Santa Monica even has like different documents sometimes. But I think from what I've heard in previous town hall discussions and what we've discussed as a board, there doesn't seem to be a lot of space for stages 3 and 4 in the USAU return to play guidelines, simply because it's a lot of risk. Remy, do you want to expand on that, or can you expand on that?
Yeah, I think there's just some acknowledgement that Frisbee isn't really Frisbee unless you're playing Frisbee. And so you sort of go from being able to do small group skills training where there is no interpersonal interaction to playing proper Frisbee with like some reasonable mark. The issue that starts to happen with stage 3 and stage 4 is like, can you make a play on the disc? Can you make a play on the disc if somebody's near you? How do I decide that in gameplay situations? And for me, I mean, I think to Grant's point, like to just sort of recognize that stages 3 and 4 probably aren't worth the risk, in that until we can more safely play, we want to be not playing. I know, it's a crazy concept.
Yeah, so the only other sort of things I have to say about this are, we've been exploring this a lot with Sky U. We have a high school team where we hire their coaches for them, and 90% of the kids that are part of the high school team get high school credit for the course, and they get a pass-fail credit. And so, this has been a big question on our mind in terms of making sure that the independent study in physical education is still something that the kids are going to get credit for. And luckily, our connections with the athletic director at the school are really solid, and they, to this point, have said, green light, just they trust us, and I think that's huge. But I think part of that trusting is really like making sure that we stay in this like 1, 2A, and 2B phase for a long time. And you know, to be honest, we're getting a lot of pressure from parents because they feel like their kids are depressed because they're not able to meet with other kids, and they need exercise. So we're trying to do our best to provide a fun experience that is still allowing the kids to be active and social in some aspect. But yes, we don't foresee leaving stages 2A or 2B until really like, I think California stages and LA County stages 3 and 4, we're still at 2B. So, you know, it's really not until there's a full open, you know, opening of our city and vaccines and a traceable way to document those that we feel comfortable at SkyU.
Yeah, and I mean, on that note, fields are still closed, so we can't rent anything, we can't host anything. And I know there was an article on Ultiworld earlier this week about a league being run in Utah, and we've read it, we've looked at it, we've been in touch with the guy who wrote it and who organized the league, and like, there are things we can take out of that and question, and we had follow-up questions, but Utah's also very different than Los Angeles. So it's good guidelines and there's some good ideas in there, and those are being considered, but like Grant said, we're just not ready yet.
I feel like most of that was rehashing things that have sort of been said at other town halls. We just wanted to correlate it with USAU guidelines. If folks have any other thoughts on that, feel free to raise your hand, pop it in the chat, give that another minute or so, and then we can move on to our sort of final talking point.
I'd like to say something about that, just because vaccines came up there at the end. And I guess I've made it pretty clear my personal beliefs about, decreased risk, access to vaccinations, affordability of vaccinations, et cetera. Something, a sort of open-ended question I just want folks to be thinking about is, not necessarily as LAOUT, as a community, what will our expectations be? I don't know if we can mandate that people are vaccinated. And furthermore, even if we could, what do you expect them to bring their paperwork to a pickup game? So I think that those are real questions that we're going to have to ask ourselves and each other. And, to the extent that if the majority of people playing in a game, whether it's league or pickup, are vaccinated, there's less risk for those people. And I have some understanding, not a lot, of how that works, but I think it's going to be worth talking about, and I think that's really going to be a big question for the new board, a big and interesting question. So just kind of be thinking about that in the back of your brain. What would you do if somebody that is incredibly against vaccines, has publicly said they're against vaccines, showed up at your pickup game? Would you let that person play, or would you stay?
All right. Well, we can certainly circle back later if folks have other questions. But our final sort of topic for the evening, our final topic of the evening that we have planned is getting some feedback from all of you about what you would like to hear from our nominees or candidates for the new LAOUT board. And part of this is, well, one, we want them to be able to answer your questions. And two, this was partially guidance that we got from both and consulting about making, candidate statements can sometimes feel, they can create anxiety it's not always the most comfortable situation for everyone. So anyway, having these questions ahead of time so that our candidates and nominees can prepare statements, I think it will be really beneficial to all of you. So yeah, if there are any questions that you have for the nominees and candidates, I'm on us. Yeah.
Or anybody you want to nominate? Or if you want to nominate yourself.
Really just put them on the spot.
Lish said, I'd like to hear about candidates' views on LAOUT's role within our community. LAOUT's role within our community. So like how the board operates and like interacts with the community, maybe?
Yeah, sorry, I'm eating, so. Yeah, like the purpose of creating leagues, like what we're trying to accomplish there, how we're balancing that with community involvement, the balance of recreational and pro leagues, which is my obvious bias here. But it's all a part of the ultimate community, so I do think it's relevant.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I believe there's part of our election timeline is candidate statements. Lauren or Ramy, please jump in if I'm speaking out of turn on this or out of my mind, but we can definitely ask people to address their thoughts on this prior to the election.
That's what I thought we were doing.
Yes. Yeah, well,
Yeah.
we wanted to put together a list of questions that all the candidates can ask. Or
I wasn't sure if Lish meant she wanted to hear from it like right now.
No.
Nope.
Okay.
Do you want to put up, Grant or Christy, the slide with the election timeline so folks can see like what we're looking at next and you know, what we're trying to accomplish and when?
Yeah, I think Grant can hopefully pull that one up.
Yeah, give me just a second.
Dave said, I'd like to know from each candidate how she or he would define success at the end of their year of service. Technically, they get 2 years, but that's a good question.
So just to go over this really quickly, we have just one more week for nominations. So September 6th will be here before we know it. So if y'all know people who want to serve on the board and want to help lead the community, please nominate them through the website, nominate yourselves. We've gone over this at previous town halls, but just to recap, we're looking at redefining how we do board leadership to make it more equitable so that it's not solely reliant on volunteering and volunteering folks' time, which is an inequitable practice. So looking at compensating board members in some way, and really trying to elevate the voices of marginalized folks in our community who haven't had representation, and the platform at the level of the LAOUT board previous until now. As many of you know, our community was run by one individual for many, many years. And this board structure is new, as you know, new within the last 5 or so years. So as we continue to iterate, we want to make sure that we are creating space for more and more people in our community to lead more diversely and more equitably. So with that in mind, we'd love to hear from you about nominating yourself, nominating others, and then those personal statements, which will help prompt with questions that you have from folks, will come out in the end of September, and then voting will take place in the beginning of October, with the new board being announced mid-October. And that right after the new board starts, those folks will receive a board orientation and training from both and, which we've hired them to do already, that will include some strategic planning for the 2-year term that those folks will serve. I see a question coming in from Dave Adelson that says, how do you deal with the issue that a constituency could have representation on the board without necessarily, well, having representation in outcomes? I'm struggling a little bit to understand that question. Can you restate it for me, Dave? Okay. Looks like there's a question also for Rami.
I think Andrew's just sort of weighing in on what I had posed about the vaccination process. Yeah, Spaz, we can read through that. I mean, to be sure, I wasn't, I don't think we can necessarily solve that tonight, but that is the question that I want, us to be thinking about, just as a community and individually.
All right, Dave, I think you're off mute now.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so what I meant was on the boards I've served on, there are times you're considering something, it comes to a vote, everybody votes. I served on some very polarized boards where there was a lot of institutional power at stake. And so we had a system for proportional representation among the electorate so that every constituency had representation on the board, but it turns out that doesn't mean that you get representation in outcomes, because if it comes down to majority vote and you're not part of the majority, then you don't necessarily have a share of the outcome, which is a common frustration when you have centralized organizations. So I was wondering how you've addressed, or how you would address that, so that if a constituency has representation on the board, that they're sure to have some representation in outcomes, including in the way budgets are deployed. And on that point, I actually now realize I don't know. Do you guys use proportional representation for voting?
No.
That sounds like we need to draw some districts up for the community and figure out how to represent everyone. Since we just started taking all of the user data in from this year and didn't get very much since we only got Winter League signups, I don't think that we have that kind of infrastructure in place to determine that.
You don't need demographic data to have necessarily have proportional representation forms of voting. There are a variety of different voting mechanisms that address that so that pluralities do get representation. But again, one of the core issues and one of the great frustrations if you're somebody who's in a minority on a board that acts via majority rule is that you end up spending a lot of time, again, not necessarily having representation and outcomes. So designing that so that board service makes sense even for people who are, for example, just representing an important but narrow section of the constituencies, that takes a little bit of thought and design.
Yep, it does. And the way that our bylaws are written right now, it is a very traditional kind of majority process. That said, the bylaws can be rewritten, and that, as we've talked about in previous town halls about the board setup and leadership for our community, all of these issues are open and they're up for input from folks and for new leadership to step in and decide how to represent our community and how to make decisions like that in a more equitable way. And that's part of why we've engaged the expertise of both and who really, more than any other nonprofit consulting firm I've worked with in the past, I've been with nonprofits for over 15 years, that they are focused on equity in a way that helps to reimagine some of the nonprofit industrial complex, which LAOUT suffers from as much as every other nonprofit in this country. So yeah, there's certainly a lot to think about in that space. And we are hoping to continue to empower folks to reimagine how we lead our community. All right. Anything else around the elections, the upcoming nomination process, or I don't know, any other questions, any shout outs, anything else?
Anybody kind of interested in running but a little not sure and have another question or on chat? We can talk later too if you don't want to talk now. Anybody have any good shows they just watched on Netflix?
Before this started, Nora and I had just started the Netflix documentary on guide dogs becoming like the training process from puppy to guide dog. We're very excited.
I had a quick question, kind of for Dave, actually. Dave, I was wondering, like, did you have a proposal by chance by bringing up that question about strong representation of every aspect of our community?
Well, I think the short answer is not a definitive one.
Okay.
A lot of the choices I made after that experience on the boards I served on was that I think it's really useful to work with people who share your views and be as much as possible in solidarity with other people so that you're not involved in a struggle over differing approaches to solving problems. I think that's easier. It doesn't always work when you have a centralized resource that has to be shared out between people, and a lot of the people you want to share the resource with aren't actively engaged in it, alienated from it at one level or another for reasons historical or otherwise. So, I think to a degree, flipping the role of the board from seeing it as leadership to seeing it as service of other leaders distributed more broadly allows a lot more people to have representation and outcomes. But it's a longer conversation and you caught me off guard. So
Oh, no. It was just,
yeah.
I wouldn't expect like a full answer, but maybe I just thought
one
maybe you had
of the
like
things, well, I actually do. There was one thing that I had proposed, which was when you're making budgetary decisions, if you had proportional representation about budget allocation, you can't always do it because sometimes you need to put enough budget into one thing to actually make it go. And then, so you have to have board agreement on that, et cetera, et cetera. But if you have a section of your funding reserved so that the voting, so if given proposals have a certain amount of support, even if it's not majority support, they receive a certain amount of funding. That's why a throwback, we did the Ultimate Community Support Fund. That allows us to give microgrants to people who want to engage projects that might not be projects that we, well, our goal is to have other people engage a lot more of the work that we'd like to see done rather than us do it. But but yeah, so you can do it with budgets if you have proportional representation in voting. That's one way to do that. There are others, but again, longer conversation.
I think we also just need to recognize, we don't all have the answers right now, and certainly surrounding oneself with other people who think alike when the status quo is white is problematic and continues to be. That's my main concern. Yeah, so thanks, Dave, for those ideas, and Dawn for posing that question. In terms of watching things, if I may, I did like a panel on Friday. It's on YouTube. I think maybe I can include the link right now in this chat. It was led by Disc Over Diversity. And so Shani Crawford, who is like a longtime player of Frisbee and sort of leading the charge in some really important equity and anti-racism conversations, and then two other people on the panel as well. And I mean, I'm mostly mentioning it just to like prop up her organization and to mention her and her incredible work. But everybody, I think, on the call had some good things to say, on the conversation had some good things to say. So let me see if somebody else wants to wrap things up. I'm gonna see if I can.
Kramer just posted it.
Kramer, yeah, posted the link.
I think it came out like pretty good. So yeah, watch it and support Shani and the work she's doing.
Yeah, Dave also mentioned Immigration Nation, which is a documentary on Netflix that I've seen the first 2 or 3 episodes of, which is very intense but very good. It's not really a binging show, but I would highly recommend it.
I just finished I May Destroy You, Michaela Cole's show on HBO, which is the single most brilliant piece of television in any realm I've ever seen in my entire life. She is an absolute genius, and she writes it and stars in it, and it's arresting and brilliant, and I can't say enough good things about it. It's phenomenal. I May Destroy You. Watch it.
Thies is watching ER.
Joanne and I are rewatching Breaking Bad to get some, tips and strategies for our career path change in the near future. So it's going pretty well.
Once you finish that, you can switch to Ozarks.
And you can buy his fields, right?
Yeah, if I had that meth money, I'd definitely buy his fields.
I'm happy to continue talking about Netflix shows, but if anybody has anything else for Frisbee wants to talk about, or can stick around and chat, or we can end, whatever you want. I'm around. Cool. Thies is asking if you should have a speaking here. What was that, Lish?
I'm gonna peace. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming, everyone.
Thanks for joining.
Yeah.
Thanks for everybody joining. I hope you got some good information out of this, and let us know if you have any other questions before the election.